I've always believed that life rewards hard work. If you're honest, if you stay loyal, and if you give your all eventually, life gives something back. At least that's what I used to believe. My name is Alden Daniel. I'm 42 years old, a businessman in New York City. My life looked perfect from the outside, the kind of life people envies, success, a beautiful fiancée, and a family name that meant something in the business world. But what no one saw was the quiet distance, the cracks that ran beneath the surface of our picture-perfect lives. I grew up in a luxurious mansion on the Upper East Side. My father, Professor Daniel, was a well-known academic, respected in every circle. But respect doesn't always mean love. He was strict, cold, calculating, the kind of man who valued achievement more than emotion. He used to say, "Alden, the world doesn't care about feelings. It only remembers the winners." I spent my youth trying to win, trying to earn his approval, but it always felt just out of reach. Then there was Aaliyah, my stepsister. She came into our lives when I was 15, after my mother passed away. My father remarried within a year. Aaliyah was different from me in every possible way: bold, expressive, sharp-tongued. She had a presence that demanded attention, and maybe that's why my father adored her. For years I told myself I didn't mind. She was family. We were supposed to care for each other. But deep down, I knew she never saw me as a brother. To her, I was competition. Still, I tried to ignore it. I buried myself in work, built my business from the ground up, and earned what my father never gave: me respect. By 40, I had everything I thought I wanted: money, power, a beautiful woman who loved me, Natasha. She was soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and patient, the complete opposite of the chaos I grew up in. I met her at a charity event in Manhattan. She was volunteering, organizing gifts for underprivileged children. The moment she smiled at me, something in me softened. For the first time, I felt peace. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. It was a quiet evening on the Brooklyn Bridge, just the two of us and the city lights shimmering on the water. She cried, said yes, and hugged me like I was her world. In that moment, I believed my life had finally found balance. The wounds of my past felt healed. The ghosts of my childhood faded behind the glow of her love. I had no idea that same glow would soon burn everything I'd built. The weeks after our engagement were a blur of joy and excitement. My father, surprisingly, seemed happy for me, or maybe proud that I was marrying into another influential family, Aaliyah. Well, she congratulated me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said, "You finally found someone who can tolerate your perfection." I laughed it off, pretending not to notice the venom in her tone. That was Aaliyah, always masking bitterness behind charm. Natasha, on the other hand, tried her best to get along with her. She believed in family unity. But Aaliyah had a way of twisting words, turning warmth into discomfort. She would accidentally mention my exes, bring up old failures during dinners, or compare my business achievements to others in subtle ways that only I understood. Natasha often told me, "She's just trying to get to you. Don't let her." And so I didn't. Or rather, I thought I didn't. My father's mansion became our gathering place. Every Sunday dinner felt like a performance. Aaliyah talking about her new ventures, my father silently judging everyone at the table, and me sitting beside Natasha, holding her hand under the table, silently praying for the evening to end without another argument. It was strange how, even surrounded by family, I always felt like an outsider in my own home. But Natasha changed that. She made that cold mansion feel alive again. Her laughter echoed through the halls that once only knew silence. She brought flowers, music, and warm things we had long forgotten. One evening, I remember standing by the window of my study, watching her talk to my father in the garden. She looked radiant, her hair catching the late sunlight, her smile gentle. I thought, maybe she'll soften him too. Maybe she'll bridge the distance that I never could. But what I didn't realize then was that sometimes bridges can lead you straight into the fire. Looking back now, I can see the signs. The hushed conversations between Aaliyah and my father that stopped the moment I entered the room, the way Natasha's mood changed after certain family dinners, quiet, distracted, as if something was weighing on her. The phone calls she started taking in private, the questions she avoided with a soft smile. At the time, I dismissed it all. Because when you love someone, you don't look for cracks. You paint over them. You tell yourself it's just stress, work, nerves, anything but betrayal. I was too blinded by happiness to see that my perfect world was quietly crumbling, and by the time I finally noticed, it was already too late. That night, one ordinary evening in late spring, when I found the first clue, was the moment everything began to change. It began with small things, the kind of details you almost feel silly noticing. A quiet phone call in the hallway, a sudden change in someone's tone, the way Natasha's eyes darted away when I asked simple questions. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was planning our wedding, after our meetings, vendors, endless calls. Stress could make anyone act different. But deep down, I could feel something shifting, something fragile inside our perfect life beginning to crack. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember it vividly. I'd come home earlier than usual from the office, wanted to surprise her with dinner. The house was dim, only the soft hum of the city outside breaking the silence. Then I heard her voice, soft, nervous, speaking on the phone in the next room. I froze, not because she was talking, but because of how she was talking. Her tone wasn't the warm, cheerful Natasha I knew. It was low, cautious, almost secretive. I could barely catch the words, but one line made my heart skip. She said quietly, "He can't find out, not yet." I stepped back before she noticed me. My chest tightened. He can't find out. Who was he? What was she hiding? That night, I tried to act normal. We ate together, laughed even, but every smile felt forced. I kept replaying that moment in my head, the way her voice trembled, the fear in it. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but curiosity, once lit, spreads like fire. The next day, I mentioned it casually. "You seemed stressed last night. Everything okay?" She smiled, maybe a little too quickly. "Just wedding stuff. My friend from college was helping me with arrangements." I nodded, pretended to believe her, but I could see it in her eyes. She was hiding something, and soon I realized she wasn't the only one. The following week, my father called. He wanted me to come over for dinner, just family. I hadn't planned to, but Natasha insisted we go. She said, "It'll be good for everyone to reconnect." I didn't know then that this dinner would plant the seeds of doubt I could never erase. When we arrived, Aaliyah greeted us at the door. Her perfume was overwhelming, her smile sharp as glass. "Look at you two lovebirds," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. The perfect couple. Her words made Natasha uncomfortably, could feel her hand tighten around mine. Dinner started pleasantly enough. My father sat at the head of the table, silent as usual, while Aaliyah dominated the conversation. She talked about her new business idea, about investors, about how family loyalty was the key to success. Then, out of nowhere, she turned to Natasha. "So, Natasha," she said with a smirk, "how's that? Little side project going?" Natasha froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. She smiled faintly. "Oh, it's fine. Nothing serious." Aaliyah tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Nothing serious. Funny." I thought it sounded quite important. My heart thudded. There it was, against something unspoken, hovering in the air. I glanced at my father, but he kept his eyes on his plate, silent, as if he already knew. The rest of the evening passed in tension. Natasha stayed quiet. Aaliyah looked satisfied. And my father, he simply observed, as if watching a play he'd already seen before. When we got home, I asked Natasha about it. What side project was Aaliyah talking about? She sighed, looked tired. She's just being dramatic. I told her I was considering helping a friend with a charity event. That's all. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her for a while, but that word project stuck with me. Days turned into weeks, and strange things kept happening. Emails I never received, but she reacted to. Messages she'd delete when she thought I wasn't looking. And one night, when she said she was meeting her friend Tina, I saw Tina's story on social media. She was vacationing in Florida. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time, I felt the weight of suspicion pressing on my chest. I sat in my study, staring at the city lights outside. New York looked so alive, so full of motion. But inside me, everything felt still heavy. Around midnight, I heard footsteps, soft, careful ones, moving down the hallway. I peeked out. Natasha was walking toward the balcony, phone in hand, whispering. I waited a moment, then followed quietly. The night air was cold. The curtains fluttered slightly, just enough to let me hear. Her voice was barely audible, but I caught fragments. "Yes, I'll meet you tomorrow." "No, he doesn't know. Please, just be patient. My stomach turned. My fiancée, the woman who had once called me her safe place, was lying to me. I wanted to walk out there, confront her, demand the truth. But something in me stopped. I wanted to see how far this went, because sometimes words can deceive. But actions never lie. The next day, I told her I'd be working late. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. As soon as she left, I followed, keeping distance, careful not to be seen. She took a cab to the other side of the city, near a quiet cafe by the Hudson. I parked nearby, heart pounding. After a few minutes, she stepped out, and someone was already waiting for her. It was Aaliyah. My mind went blank. I sat there in shock, watching as they hugged quickly, discreetly, and then went inside together. I don't know how long I stayed there, frozen. Part of me wanted to walk in, demand an explanation. But another part, the quieter, colder part, told me to wait, to listen, so I did. From my car, I watched them talk for almost an hour. Aaliyah leaned in close, speaking fast. Natasha looked tense, nodding, occasionally glancing toward the window. Then Aaliyah placed her hand over Natasha's, smiling almost triumphantly. It wasn't friendship. It was strategy. Something was being planned, and whatever it was, it involved me. That night, I didn't confront Natasha. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear the truth. Instead, I acted normal, pretended nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. For the first time in my life, I understood what silence could do. It wasn't peace anymore, it was armor. Over the next few days, I watched them carefully. Natasha's excuses grew bolder, her stories less believable. Aaliyah's calls became more frequent. And my father started acting strangely too. He invited me to his office one evening, saying he wanted to discuss business. But halfway through the conversation, he said something odd. You should be careful who you trust. Alden, even love can be misleading. I asked what he meant. He just smiled faintly and said, experience teaches you things books never can. Then he handed me a file, one that had nothing to do with our company. It was a document about inheritance shares. My name, my father's, alias, and a blank space recently added for Natasha. I stared at him, confused. Why is Natasha's name on this? I asked. He shrugged. She's about to become family, isn't she? His tone was calm, but I could see something in his eyes, a flicker of satisfaction. And in that instant, I realized something horrifying. This wasn't just about love. This was about money, power, control. And I was standing in the middle of a game that had already begun long before I noticed. That night, when the lights went out and the city went quiet, I sat alone in the dark. The pieces were starting to form, but the picture was still incomplete. 3 people I trusted, my father, my stepsister, and the woman I loved, all had secrets connected by a single thread. Me. I didn't know what they were planning, but I made a silent promise to myself that night. If they were building a web around me, I would find every thread, and when the time came, I'd make sure the web collapsed on them instead. The thing about secrets is, they don't stay buried forever. No matter how carefully you hide them, they always find a way to surface. Sometimes through words, sometimes through silence, and sometimes through a simple mistake. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Natasha was in the kitchen making coffee, and I was pretending to read the newspaper. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Once, then again, she glanced at it, hesitated, and quickly turned it face down. I looked up. You can answer. It's fine. She smiled, too quickly. It's just a spam message. Then she picked up her cup and changed the subject. But I'd noticed something, the notification preview, before she flipped it over. Just one word. Aaliyah. My gut tightened. I told myself I was imagining things. Still, when she went upstairs to shower, I couldn't resist. Her phone was still there, locked, silent. I wasn't the kind of man who went through someone's private things, at least not until that day. Her password had always been her mother's birthday, knew it because she'd told me once. Laughing, I'm terrible with codes. My fingers hesitated over the screen, trembling slightly. Then I typed it in. It unlocked. The chat list opened and there it was, Aaliyah. The conversation was long weeks of messages, dozens of exchanges. My throat went dry as I scrolled. Aaliyah, he still doesn't know. Good. Natasha, I hate lying to him. Aaliyah, don't be dramatic. It's for everyone's benefit. Natasha, I just want this over with. He trusts me too much. Aaliyah, Exactly. That's why it's working. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. The words blurred for a second. I scrolled further down. Aaliyah, once the papers are signed, you'll get your share. Natasha, I don't care about the money. Aaliyah, you should. After what he did to my family, he deserves this. What I did, I whispered under my breath. My mind spun, trying to make sense of it. What had I done? I'd always treated Aaliyah as a sister, maybe distant, but never cruel. I didn't realize tears were rolling down my cheeks until one hit the screen. I wiped it away quickly and locked the phone again, just before I heard her footsteps. She walked back in, smiling softly. What are you reading? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Her eyes still looked kind. Her voice still sounded warm. And yet, suddenly, she felt like a stranger in my own home. Just the business section, I said. My voice didn't tremble, but my heart did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing. Every breath, every movement, it all felt foreign now. I wanted to confront her, scream, demand answers, but something in me held back. I needed to understand why. I got up quietly, went to my study, and sat in the dark. The city lights spilled through the window, painting faint patterns on the wall. That's when I remembered the file my father had shown me, the one with Natasha's name newly added. I still had a copy of it on my desk. I opened it again, scanning the details. And there it was, a note scribbled in the corner in my father's handwriting to be finalized after the merger. Merger? I checked my calendar. Our company had no upcoming mergers. So what merger was he talking about? Then it clicked. My father had started a private partnership last year. A side investment, he said, was for family security. He'd asked me to sign a few preliminary documents, but I hadn't looked deeply into them. Maybe I should have. I opened my laptop, searching through old files and emails. There it was, a folder labeled Danielle Holdings. Inside were several documents, and one email chain that made my blood run cold. From Aaliyah Danielle to Professor Danielle, Natasha Collins, subject confirmation of shares before engagement, announcement. Bodhi, once Alden transfers the property rights and the merger completes, we proceed as planned. No delays this time. I sat back, numb. They weren't just lying to me, they were working together. Aaliyah. My father and Natasha planning something behind my back, something tied to my company. My life. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a well-crafted trap. The next morning, I couldn't look at Natasha the same way. Every smile looked rehearsed. Every touch felt calculated. But I had to stay calm. If they were playing a game, I'd play along. Over the next few days, I observed Aaliyah and Natasha met more often. My father invited me to casual discussions more than usual. And at every turn, I saw it the same careful performance. They thought I was still blind. One evening, I decided to test something. I mentioned to Natasha, casually, I've been thinking of revising my will. You know, just to make sure things are clear before the wedding. She froze for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled. That's smart, Alden. It's better to handle these things early. She said it so easily. Too easily. That same night, Aaliyah called me out of nowhere. Hey, brother, she said sweetly. Dad told me you're updating your will. That's very responsible of you. My grip tightened on the phone. How did you know about that? Oh, Dad mentioned it. We talk sometimes, you know. Her voice was smug, unbothered, like she already knew the ending to a movie I hadn't even finished watching. I hung up, heart pounding. Now I was certain. They were all connected. 2 days later, I got the confirmation I needed. A message from a private number appeared on my phone. It simply said, "You deserve to know the truth. Check the hotel on 5th Avenue, room 304. Tonight, no name, no clue who sent it." For a second, I thought it was a prank, but something in my gut told me it wasn't. That night, I drove there. The hotel was one of those quiet, upscale places used for business meetings or other kinds of meetings. I parked across the street, waited, and watched. At 8:47 p.m., Natasha arrived. She looked nervous, kept glancing around before walking inside. 10 minutes later, Aaliyah showed up. And then, to my horror, my father. The three of them, together. In that hotel, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I waited over an hour before I finally forced myself to go in. I didn't knock on the door, I didn't need to. I had already seen enough. When they came out later, their faces were serious, whispering. Natasha looked like she'd been crying. My father's hand rested on her shoulder, like he was consoling her. Aaliyah smiled faintly, as if she'd won something. That was it. The confirmation, whatever this plan was real, and it was happening soon. When I got home that night, I poured myself a drink, my hands trembling. I stared at the glass, watching the reflection of the city lights flicker across the surface. The world outside kept moving, taxis, people, laughter. But inside me, everything had stopped. I whispered to myself, "Why, Natasha?" I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but the truth was already out there, bleeding through the cracks. And deep down, I knew this wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about betrayal. That night marked the end of my innocence, the first real crack in the illusion I'd built around my life. And as I sat there in silence, I made a decision. If they thought I was weak, if they thought I would simply fall apart, they were wrong. From that night onward, I would become someone else, someone who watched quietly, waited patiently, and when the time came, struck without mercy. Because sometimes, the only way to expose the truth is to become the storm that reveals it. After that night, nothing was the same. Every glance, every word, every smile, everything carried a question. I had always believed in love, in trust, in loyalty. Now, I trusted no one. But I also understood something crucial. Panic doesn't uncover secrets. Impulsiveness doesn't bring justice. To fight a web woven by three people who had every advantage, who had been planning this for months. Maybe years, I needed patience, strategy, precision. And so, I became silent. The first step was observation. I started paying attention to the smallest details. Natasha's habits changed subtly after that night. She became meticulous about her phone, always locking it before I could see it, even pretending to drop it occasionally so I wouldn't notice. Aaliyah's movements were calculated. She arrived at the house at exactly the times she needed to create the illusion of coincidence. Her calls with Natasha never, and my father, he was the hardest to read. Calm, distant, detached. But every so often, when he thought no one was watching, a satisfied smirk would cross his face. I realized quickly they weren't reckless. They were clever, and clever people underestimate no one. I needed evidence. Not assumptions, not hints, not the whispers of suspicion that haunted me at night. I needed proof. So I began quietly, carefully. I set up cameras in my office, strategically placed where documents could appear, where conversations might unfold. I started keeping meticulous notes, writing down every odd call, every suspicious meeting. I reviewed emails, accounts, even my father's business communications, whenever I could get access. I also tested them. One evening, I mentioned casually over dinner that I was considering transferring a small portion of my shares to a charity account. Natasha stiffened. Aaliyah's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly. My father didn't comment, but I could feel the tension ripple across the table like an invisible current. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. The reaction told me everything. Then came the next test. I sent an innocuous email from my business account. Nothing about money or inheritance, just a routine business proposal. Within hours, Natasha had forwarded it, not to a colleague, but to Aaliyah. I had the timestamp. I had the direction. I had proof. It was small, insignificant, but it confirmed the pattern. They were coordinating. Weeks passed like this, each day a study and observation. Every action they took left a mark. Every word they whispered behind closed doors added another thread to the web I was untangling. I started following Natasha discreetly, tracing her movements without her noticing. Sometimes it was just to see where she went after leaving the house. Other times it was to confirm meetings with Aaliyah or even my father. I discovered something that made my stomach turn. Natasha had a mailbox she used exclusively for Aaliyah's messages, physical letters hidden in a storage facility near the city. It was almost elegant, in a twisted way the lengths they had gone to hide their collaboration. I noted the location carefully. I would need it later. But it wasn't just about tracking them. I had to understand them. I had to predict their moves. Aaliyah, I realized, thrived on control. She wasn't just jealous, she wanted dominance, power over the family and me. Natasha, sweet as she seemed, was manipulable, caught between loyalty and ambition. And my father, he was the puppeteer, detached, calculating, always steps ahead. I began creating my own strategy. Not retaliation, not yet. First, I had to understand the rules of the game. I started mapping their behaviors, times, patterns, reactions, even micro-expressions. I could almost anticipate their conversations before they happened. And then came the first break in the web, the moment I realized I had the upper hand. It was an ordinary Thursday. I pretended to leave early for a meeting, just as Natasha prepared to head to a lunch with Aaliyah. I followed her quietly to a cafe on Madison Avenue. Through the glass, I could see them seated together, laughing, sharing something over a tablet. Aaliyah's hand rested on Natasha's arm in a way that made my blood boil. But then I noticed that Talia was careless. She left a document on the table when she got up to use the restroom. I waited until they left, then slipped in unnoticed. The paper was a summary of my father's new business merger plans, with annotations from both Aaliyah and Natasha. It detailed precisely how they intended to restructure my company holdings, how my shares would be diluted, how control would shift subtly to them, and, most chilling, how my inheritance could be redirected through legal loopholes. It was more than proof. It was a blueprint of betrayal. I scanned it, memorized the details, and carefully photographed the document with my phone. Every name, every date, every signature. That night, I placed the file back exactly where it had been. When Natasha and Aaliyah returned, nothing had changed. They had no idea, and that night, I tasted the first hint of empowerment since discovering the truth. But I couldn't act yet, not openly. Aaliyah would notice. Natasha would protest. My father would manipulate any confrontation into a display of loyalty and morality. I had to wait. I had to make them overplay their hand. So I became the silent observer, the calm in the storm, the invisible presence in their lives. Every meeting, every whispered phone call, every false smile, they all became my data. I created logs, spreadsheets, timelines mapping every interaction, every plan, every move they made. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally, but it was necessary. The web was tightening around them as much as it was around me, but this time, I was the spider. Even then, I struggled with my own emotions. Natasha's smile still had the power to melt me. Aaliyah's laughter still echoed in my memory like a challenge I couldn't ignore. And my father. Well, my father had a way of looking at me that reminded me of who I was supposed to be: the obedient son, the heir, the pawn. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. One evening, as I reviewed the documents, I realized the depth of their betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about power. It was about control over my life, my emotions, my family. They had underestimated one thing: me. I was still emotional.